So he managed to come in quietly. Welcome to the Burlingame Historical Society quarterly meeting. My name is Jennifer Pfaff, and I'm the president. And there are a number of our board members here. Put your hands up, please. Thank you. And we have a dignitary, at least one, a new councilwoman, Andrea Papachon, in the back, way in the back. Thank you for coming. And everybody else, I'm sorry if I leave anyone out that I don't see. Tonight I'm going to be presenting Ansel's Town of Easton. It is somewhat related to a, can you hear me okay? Is this good? Somewhat related to a presentation we gave pretty much exactly a year ago. But it turned into a research project, so it ended with a lot more information in it, which is good, but I have to race through it to get it all done, and I'll try to be not do racy so that you absorb it, but I still want to leave a little time. I'm trying to get done a little, like 7:45 if possible, or 7:20 in case anyone has any comments or questions, etc. I'm going to rely on another board member and author, Joanne Garrison, who knows this topic pretty well, and I might rely on her to help me with some little factoids here and there. Okay. Oh, here comes somebody else. Great. No, that's a good problem to have. All right. Hi. Okay. So let's start at the beginning. So you have the context of the early period of the mills. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. That's why they make the text white on black and actually see it in the dark. Good. Let's start at the beginning. So you have the context of the early period of the Mills and Easton families. Ansel Ives Easton, sometimes called Tony, was born in New York, one of 11 children. He arrives in California early in the gold rush in his 30s, and in the summer of 1957, he marries Adeline Mills, the sister of Darius Ogden Mills, whose family had also arrived early in the gold rush. So let me use my little handy dandy thingy here. Wait a minute. Laser pointer, but it's dark, so there. So this is Darius Ogden Mills, whose nickname apparently was Tony. These pioneers all have the same names, which is really annoying. So any tricks you can use, you use. And below him is Adeline, after Adeline Drive, of course. This is Adeline Mills. Most of these men here, except I think for this gentleman, are Mills brothers, except for him. This is a business partner, Darius Ogden. They're all the Mills family. And these women are their wives, and she's also, right, Joanne, I forgot, she's someone important, importante. Anyway, okay. So, I lost my notes. Get back here.
What's the next slide?
No, I wasn't done with that one. There, I'm learning this system. Okay, so in the summer they marry. The families had arrived early in the gold rush, and they go on their honeymoon and end up on the steamship bound for New York that sinks in a hurricane off of the Carolinas in a storm. Of 600 passengers and crew, 478 perish, along with 21 tons of gold. Adeline survives in a lifeboat, but Ansel is presumed lost. Fortunately, he's among 49 men who have been rescued by another vessel and turn up the following day. Oops, wrong way, sorry. Having returned to California in 1860, Ansel Ives Easton, Tony, and his brother-in-law, D.O. Mills, each acquire part of Rancho Burry Burry from Jose Isidro Sanchez's descendants. The Eastons and Mills become the earliest resident American landowners in North Burlingame, while William W.D.M. Howard family to the south at Rancho San Mateo are the earliest resident American landowners in southern Burlingame and northern San Mateo. And you've heard of the Howards, we've done shows on them too. So, and we have a whole website called Peninsula Royalty. If you're interested, it's really cool. So here you see the blue area, it's huge, of Burry. The Easton's property covered 1,500 acres from Crystal Springs Lake to the bay, from what is now Sanchez Avenue to Mills Creek, just north of Adeline Drive. Here, the Eastons established Home Farm, later called Black Hawk Ranch. Because the Eastons' interest in Adobe-style construction used throughout California in the 1700s, Ansel builds his home using adobe bricks from Jose Isidro Sanchez's dismantled home located near Sanchez and Laguna Avenues. Only the second story was constructed of adobe, while the first story was made of heavy timber. This house collapsed in a major earthquake centered on the Hayward Fault in 1868. So having survived the maritime disaster, here we have Ansel Ives and Adeline Easton a few years later. Like many gold rush pioneers, Ansel may have always also mined the miners. His occupation in the early 1860s, according to the San Francisco City Directories, is as a steam laundry business at or near the San Francisco Presidio. Steam laundries were early large-scale industrial cleaning facilities that were steam-powered. The workers were largely women, perhaps one of the early examples of literal sweatshops. Whatever the case, by 1863, Ansel had enough capital to build a sophisticated racetrack on his North Burlingame property to showcase his racehorse breeding business. The horse depicted in this painting was named Black Hawk, an Irish stallion imported by Easton. It's believed to be the first thoroughbred brought to California for breeding and racing. The Easton's Black Hawk property was named after this stallion. Shell Mound Park Racetrack, promoted as, get this, Eastonia, was created on a marshland in the lower end of today's Broadway at the upper left. The base of the track was constructed using finely ground shells from shell mounds on the site, seemingly plentiful along the bay's edge, remnants from very early Indian settlements. At right is a rare image of the track stands. The Daily Alta California newspaper from April 17, 1863, boasted of this track. The mile-long racetrack is destined to become the best, the safest track in the United States, to be drained by ditches and floodgates to exclude the rising tide, complete with newly invented revolving turrets for observation, and there is a system in place of electric starts and stops to prevent false starts, and a platform with electric trip mechanism to record the exact position of each horse at the score line. There was a barn and a stables facility nearby, and a hotel for visitors was even in the works. However, only 5 years later, in 1868, and not yet 50 years of age, Ansel Ives Easton, so he's Tony, passes away, leaving wife Adeline and their 2 children. And this is where I cannot read my text. The 2 children are 4-year-old Ansel Mills, we're going to learn about him, and his sister Jenny. Before we leave the Bayshore area, I wanted to point out a seminal aircraft event on the site of Shell Mound Park in 1869, the year after Ansel Ives Easton passes away. This photograph is of a 28-foot scaled model steam-driven airship known as the Aviator Hermes Jr., developed by aviator promoter Frederick Marriott. It was tested at Burlingame Shell Mound Park. This event is generally considered the first unmanned, powered flight of a lighter-than-air craft on this side of the Pacific. Marriott intended to develop a full-scale version for passenger travel, but not long thereafter, the airship burned in San Francisco and it was never rebuilt. So just so you know, Hiller Museum I think they're in San Carlos, right? It has a model of this. By 1895, for context, North Burlingame remained undeveloped, largely. Local newspapers promoted the new Chinese shrimp camp operations, leasing 5 acres of the Easton family property in the Broadway vicinity by a bay's edge. The newspaper in 1895 talked about the village employing 30 men, including 10 shanty houses and 200 funnel-shaped nets that cost, I think it was $10 a piece. And boats. Bless you, yeah. Bury Avenue, Broadway, was the service road to the Easton estate that ran from their estate stables to the racetrack. The stately curved Easton Drive was used for family and guests. Lower Easton Drive was landscaped with eucalyptus, cypress, and pines by, who else? John McLaren, in the 1880s. Shortly after he landscaped El Camino Real, which was paved in 1913. The images at left and right show Easton Drive and El Camino Real in the early pre-paved period. The concrete bridge railing at center, constructed north of Adeline Drive, was built over the Mills Creek, and it's stenciled with the name Easton Ranch, which is Black Hawk, and dated 1898. Along with the McLaren trees that remain, this concrete bridge is one of the few visible remnants from Easton's Black Hawk Ranch, and it is still there. It's important to put San Francisco Peninsula growth and development into the context of early planning and preparations for the Pan-Pacific International Exposition that took place in San Francisco in 1915. The momentum to pave El Camino Real in 1912 and 1913, for example, was in no small part due to the push for infrastructure improvements to prove to visitors beyond a shadow of a doubt that San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area had rebuilt itself and was better than ever, ready for growth and for people to settle and invest in the area. Here you can see Easton's Black Hawk Shire horses on display at that fair. So where did Easton's driveway lead beyond today's Vancouver? We'd like to share with you a closer glimpse of this residence built circa 1890 by the then 60-year-old Adeline Easton. Her home is the only Easton home on the Burlingame Ranch for which we have good photographic documentation. Hand-tinted images of the estate were made in 1911 by Charles Winslow Caldwell, a photographer and likely coachman for the ranch. It is not known if the images were taken for a specific purpose. However, they help us appreciate the expansive grounds and beautiful landscaping of the property. So I'll just run through some of these. See the size of the oak. A little bit of a view there, and the horses running around. Here's Adeline Easton in 1911. She's on the estate, and she's about 82 years old. She's been a widow for 43 years, many of which were spent caring for her grandchildren after her daughter Jenny died at age 29 years following the birth of her third child. In June 1916, Adeline passes away. A large portion of the Easton acreage had already been annexed to Hillsborough just a few months before. With a ranch of this size, we'd always been curious as to where this large home was located and if any portion of it still remained. Using old real estate transactions along with this 1919 map of the Easton foothills that appeared to include the footprint of a large structure. And I have to mention, I used my husband too, so I kind of cheated. He did overlays for him. That appeared to include the footprint of a large structure surrounded by a network of roads and trails. We are fairly certain we found the location of the former Easton home. In March 1917, the Easton family sold the home and 81 acres of the ranch to New York financier and polo champion J. Cheever Cowden. You can follow the sequence of maps and aerials while keeping your eye on the given roads and landmarks that remain fixed. Here's the same site on the late 1920s map surrounded by the developing Easton area. By the fall of 1917, the new owner we just talked about, Mr. Cowden, he announced his intent to join the U.S. military, so I guess it's World War I, as an aviator, and he started to subdivide the acreage over a couple of years. 33 acres of the former Easton estate, including the Easton home, was sold to somebody named Louis Titus. 28 acres went to the mining magnate D.C. Jacklin, and by late 1921, another 7 acres went to George Armsby. And I'm sure you all know the streets around there all kind of named after these people. In February 1920, 8 acres were sold to W.C. Van Antwerp for his future home. The Daily News Leader newspaper reported that the 8-acre Hillsborough land sale of $39,000 was one of the most expensive transactions at the time, at roughly $5,000 per unimproved acre. Arthur Brown eventually designed a notable Tudor home for the site, which was then subdivided again over the years. More recently, the estate has been known as the Paul Fagan Estate. Fagan owned the old San Francisco Seals, and now the property is apparently being subdivided and redeveloped again. But I think they're keeping the home. Here you can see the current aerial of what is likely to have been the location of Adeline's home. The Jacklin acreage became Hillsborough Oaks subdivision in 1932. At the lower edge of this aerial in the green outline is the comparatively small section that became a Hillsborough Ranch-style subdivision in 1948. Not coincidentally, it is named Black Hawk Ranch. Would have been nice if I found that before I started doing all the work. So, let's see. Let me just show you. It's, whoop. Oh no. Back. Wrong way. Looking for my little clicker in the dark. I can't find it. There it is. There, right there. See, it's this little area. And for those of you familiar with Hillsborough's Downey Way, that's kind of a big square up there, and I think that was probably the last little piece. You know, sometimes when they're taking things apart, the house is the last thing to go. It kind of closes the land that gets developed all around it, and that kind of what happened to the Henderson estate as well. So anyway. Okay. So in 1896, Ansel Ives' son, Ansel Mills Easton, announces that he'll retire from managing Black Hawk Ranch Dairy. By 1905, at 40 years old, he begins to carve up sections of his family's vast estate. As mentioned, Ansel Mills Easton's only sibling, Jenny Easton, pictured above, left, died in 1887. She was only 29. In this photograph from the 1890s, Ansel Mills Easton, at right, chats with a gentleman I believe to be Charles Friedrich Crocker, Jenny's husband, and Ansel's brother-in-law. Mr. Crocker died of Bright's disease a decade after Jenny passed away, so probably not that long after this image is taken. Ansel Mills subdivides Easton Addition No. 1 in 1905. It encompasses the area from California Drive, then called San Mateo Drive, to El Camino Real and Burlingame Avenue, which was later called Broadway, to just north of Edgehill Drive. So hopefully you can orient yourself a bit. In this early period, longer distance travelers used the railroad or the 40-line interurban electric trolley that traveled between San Francisco and San Mateo by 1903. To assist in the development of his community of Easton, in 1907, Ansel Easton built a small station along the rail line close to Broadway. That same year, Southern Pacific Company, Railroad, in case newbies here, I doubt it, completed what was known as the Bayshore Cutoff by tunneling through the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay to bypass the original 1863 rail line through Colma and Daly City. The system of 5 tunnels, 4 of which are still in use, shortened the travel distance between San Francisco and Burlingame from 13 miles to 10 and a half. The project was hyped extensively by developers like Easton, who were banking on migration to San Francisco Peninsula suburbs. A mostly friendly rivalry between the East Bay and San Francisco Peninsula suburbs was evident from the period real estate ads. Both yearned for investors. Easton's sale agent was F.J. Rogers and Company, based in San Francisco. Similar to the primitive Lion and Hope real estate offices in Burlingame proper, the Easton sales franchise operated out of a shack near the little station by the tracks. Though the migration after 1906 quake gave a boost to properties closer to Burlingame Avenue that had at least some amenities, early Easton property sales were not brisk. The subdivisions 2 through 5 on the west side of El Camino Real were platted, and I hope that's a real word, platted between late 1906 and 1911, each getting further from rail transportation, and owning a car was still a faraway concept for most. Selling a neighborhood also includes building a school. Easton School, shown above left, was constructed around 1909 in anticipation of a growing population. By 1919, Roosevelt Elementary School had been constructed, by the way. For interest's sake, I've included a 1933 image of Our Lady of Angels at the right, lower right, that expanded their original school by incorporating the defunct Easton School on site many years later. So I hope you can see the middle section. Well, actually, sort of to the right of the photo is the Easton School. No known remnants of the original Easton structure remain today as of several decades later. In June 1908, Burlingame incorporated as a city. By late 1910, discussions were underway for Easton to become part of Burlingame, then home to Burlingame was home to about 2,500 residents at the time. The reasons are nicely summarized in the San Mateo Leader newspaper from November 1910, in which town officials explain the benefits of having a large municipality. I'm guessing you can guess. Burlingame trustee Lang spoke of experiences before Burlingame's incorporation, mentioning the non-success of securing necessary improvements. You know what improvements are. After incorporation, Lang said the town gained jurisdiction of its sewers and streets, was able to lay sidewalks and plant shade trees. He added that it is the wish of the trustees to make a model suburban residential district, and that while Burlingame would not ask Easton to come into that town, it was welcome if the people of Easton wished to join, believing the advantage would be mutual. Another trustee added that Easton properties generated a small amount of tax, and so there would be very little hope of incorporating as a separate community for many years. The bottom line was more taxes collected meant more infrastructure could be built to support both growing communities. And so, in the closing days of 1910, and literally it was like the last day of 1910, a majority of voters in Easton, then a town of just 300, voted for annexation. Just 60 people casting their vote, 48 in favor, 12 opposed, And in Burlingame, a new city of roughly 2,500, 70 voted in favor and 1 against. But annexation was not a completely smooth transition. Just months into 1911, residents were informed that one post office sufficed for Burlingame, the one that was 2 miles south in Burlingame proper. And by 1912, Easton residents objected strenuously to the Easton area being referred to as North Burlingame, insisting the community still be called Easton. So remember, there are no cars, or hardly any cars then, so they had to walk or take a horse to get their mail. The dilemma of promoting the Easton property, particularly parcels west of El Camino Real, was one of logistics. Once having enticed buyers to the area from San Francisco, typically by railroad or the 40-line streetcar, developers still had to be ready with teams of horses at the little station real estate shack to take prospective buyers out to look at property. And without a growing population and tax base, infrastructure improvements would remain slow. Motivated by inspiration or perhaps desperation to sell more property, in 1911, Mr. Easton applied for and was granted a franchise by Burlingame in July of 1911 to build and operate a battery-powered electric trolley that would bring passengers from Easton Station along California Drive to Carmelita, to Cabrillo, then along Cabrillo to Hillside Drive, and then to Hillside Circle at Alvarado. An initial planned route up Broadway was objected to strenuously by Broadway homeowners who worried about the noise and who didn't want the eucalyptus trees cut down on Broadway. So by the way, Broadway also had eucalyptus trees in the early days. The railway car was the first of its kind on the West Coast. 119 Edison storage batteries were under concealed seats. It was 27.5 feet long, 13 tons, ran along 8,850 feet of single-line tracks, having a capacity of 26 passengers. The one-car railway required a 7-hour charge overnight and a 3.5-hour booster charge by the middle of the day. Initially, the charge was supplied by a cable that ran from a powerhouse on Hillside Circle, where the little brickwork shelter marked the end of the line. The powerhouse was later moved to California Drive. The initial run was Saturday, February 22nd, 1913, and it ran every half hour when the batteries were not being recharged. It whizzed along level ground at 23 miles per hour, but it slowed to 5 miles per hour up a grade. It floated even slower. On rainy days, the car would often stop in the middle of Hillside Drive, and the motorman, Mr. Fisk, would need to pour sand on the rails to try to get it going. In November of 1913, the San Francisco Call newspaper partnered with Easton and his agent Rogers to run free excursions from San Francisco via train or 40 line to be met by Easton's railway system, to be taken to Hillside Circle, to get out of the fog, into the beautiful hills, and have a picnic. The San Francisco Call ran similar promotions to new residential neighborhoods all around the Bay, likely because real estate advertisement was a significant source of income for the newspaper. 500 people took part in the excursion to Easton, and the paper reported that $20,000 in real estate had been sold as a result. So here's, just for people maybe not familiar with the numbers over there, Easton 6 and 7 are already getting pretty high up there, and then the Burlingame Hills, you know, of course. So those are all the area beyond west of Vancouver. So let's imagine we are amongst 500 visitors in November of 1913, and we get a ride full fare paid to Easton for an outing on the Easton's Railway, which, by the way, wasn't called Easton's Railway, it was called Burlingame Railway, just to straighten that out. What would we have seen out the windows 111 years ago? Thanks to a very special donation of a photo album containing a number of images by renowned photographer Gabriel Milan, we are able to see some of what these excursioners experienced. At the upper left is an image of Gabrielle Milan, who was retained by Easton to capture imagery of the Easton Additions under development during the period circa 1913-1914. And it's due to his work in Easton that we have a much richer knowledge about the area in North Burlingame. So it's a little then and now, where we knew what was there now. This is from last year's, we posted homes we were familiar with. So these are Cabrillo and Cortez homes that are still there. One was Cortez and one was Cabrillo. And I didn't actually know what this street is. You know, it gets a little complicated there. I don't know the streets, it's very hard to know which parallel street that is, so you're going to have to figure it out. Here's Vancouver Avenue at Hillside Drive, so this is where it starts kind of going pretty steep up there. And thanks to Joanne, took this picture last year of what it looks like today at the right. Again, I think this is Castillo. And those two homes still exist. They're beautiful, especially the one on the left is very beautiful. Rare image of Cole Mansion can also be seen off to the right, and it's close to completion if you really kind of focus. You see that kind of middle of the screen off to the right. There's another one. This was taken down, I don't know, about 20 years ago, developed into 2 lots on Montero. I don't know where this one is, I haven't figured that out yet.
That still exists.
Yes, it sure does. It's a little different now. So here's the same view of Hillside Shelter today, which you just saw a second ago. See? There, right there. So if you got to the top, it kind of veers north. So as you can see, where there was originally a park behind the trellis, the park is long gone, and there's a cluster of homes that are kind of pushed up against that trellis. They've been there for many decades. If you look closely here on Alvarado, the tracks may be visible as they veer north. In this image of the side of the shelter at Alvarado, again, the newly built Cole Mansion is off to the right in the background. So I guess the Coles were early Easton purchasers for their Oaks. Wasn't it called the Oaks? Yeah. This view was taken behind the shelter in the park, looking through the structure towards Hillside and El Camino Real. It must have been really beautiful back there. Here are more images of the park where early picnickers arrived on Easton's Railway to enjoy the sunshine and beautiful scenery typical on Sundays, and ideally they would purchase property. Joanne took these images last year of what it looks like now in the back. This is the stairs. So here's Hillside Circle around 1912, 1913. I think you probably know that home. It's actually called 1385 Hillside Circle, and I was mentioning to one of our visitors this evening as a second address, but I've forgotten it at the moment.
10.
Something like that, 10 or 11. Yeah. Okay. The Easton Drive with a semicircular ornamental wall and pillars.
That's where the staircase is.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it was really beautiful. And what it looks like now. Unfortunately, a lot has been either removed or knocked over. So this here is not a Milan image. It was one from our collection. It was recently donated, actually. But it was taken about the same time period. It shows women reading on the steps above Easton Drive, where that circular brick wall was built. Now it's just a shadow of its former self. This brochure uses the Milan images to promote the Burlingame Hills region. It notes that prospective buyers will be offered automobile rides from Easton Station into the Upper Easton Additions and Hills as a convenience. Here's Summit Drive. And you can see on the side, if you look carefully, the real estate sign for Burlingame Hills with F.J. Rogers' name on it. And here it is today, where Hoover School is. And this is Canyon Drive. Easton hired renowned landscape architect Mark Daniels. And by the way, till I started doing this project, I actually had no idea he was involved with Easton at all, but he was. So he hires this famous architect, Mark Daniels, our landscape architect, to create a beautiful route into the Burlingame Hills. The San Francisco Chronicle in May 1913 described Daniels' landscape as a road, quote, winding about the hillside for more than 6 miles in length with various embellishments, including stone bridges, seats, stairs, walls, and entrance gates. This view shows what is known today as Canyon Road. Is it Canyon Drive or Canyon Road? Drive. I have to fix that typo. Similar to Gabrielle Milan, Daniels enjoyed patronage of rich and influential clients, having designed several Bay Area residential neighborhoods, including Forest Hill, Thousand Oaks in Berkeley, well, Forest Hill's in the city, Thousand Oaks in Berkeley, and the 17-mile drive, among others. I found out he also did Bel Air, did a lot of communities all over the place. He was workaholic. And here it is today. So I think a couple of years ago, at least one of those pillars was still up, and then somebody hit it. So, not much left. Yeah. The drive also appears to have included what today is known as Summit Drive. Here you can see a Hillsborough home built a few years prior, in 1908, with Daniels' stone benches built near the road off to the left, if you look carefully. And there's the home, which is still there. It's in Hillsborough. Here's some benches.
That's on Hillside Circle, right?
You know, it could be. I get so mixed up there. We drove around, Joanne and I, trying to find out where we were. It's just some of the walls are gone. So if you can find them, it's great. Yeah, a lot of these we just don't know exactly which curb. The road might have been changed over time, but it was very wooded. There are 2 men actually down there. So you can see it was a big deal. It was written in the paper as one of the finest scenic roads in the West, and they called it Easton Drive, because that's what it was at the time, the Upper Easton Drive, terminating at the highest point of Burlingame Hills, providing scenic views that have attracted hundreds of motorists every weekend. So in 1914, the same year the Burlingame Hills project was completed, Daniels was appointed landscape engineer in Yosemite Park, followed by a brief stint as general superintendent and landscape engineer for the entire National Park Service. So he's a pretty big deal. And if you think about when you drive into Yosemite, they do have very similar walls to what you just saw, stone walls. So, eager for a nicer train station for prospective buyers, Easton lobbied the Railroad Commission between 1914 and 1919. His small original station was to be removed in 1914 when arrangements with Southern Pacific had expired. But there was contention over the land's value, how much he expected the railroad to pay for it, and this did not go over well with the Burlingame trustees, which is council members, nor the railroad. And for the next 5 years, Ansel Easton, Easton residents, Burlingame trustees, Broadway merchants, and the North Burlingame Community Women's Club sparred about where a new station would go, how it would look, the configuration of Broadway. Does this sound familiar? So this was pre-freeway era. Well, it's because everyone cares about our communities, right? So pre-freeway era. So many wanted to see the area at the bottom there as a square-shaped terminus for parking, much the same as Burlingame Square by the Burlingame Avenue train station functioned, with a station structure located west of the railroad track. So here you can see a very early image of, we don't know if it's the second station or what, because the records are so bad, but records from the railroad are unclear as to construction dates, but this early bungalow-style station was constructed on the east side near today's car wash, and by 1920 had been moved to the west side at the insistence of the North Burlingame Community Women's Club. Now it's part of the Maverick Jack's restaurant on the west side. The stripped down and reconfigured structure basic form is still somewhat discernible and is connected to a Spanish Revival structure on the west side, but the exact construction dates of that are unclear as well. In September 1914, the San Mateo Daily News Leader newspaper wrote of Easton's intention to replace his battery-powered trolley system with a standard modern gauge trolley, noting that the growth in that section of Burlingame was so rapid that the battery car has proved inadequate. But in reality, Mr. Fisk, the singular motorman conductor seen in this image, had few passengers outside of Sundays. And in fact, the railway was bleeding money, while the automobile was making its way into everyday life. And so there would be no expansion into the hills with yet another trolley system. In 1916, Easton applied to the California Railroad Commission for abandonment of the line, which was granted in November 1917 on the condition that Easton replace the service with a 15-passenger, 40-horsepower Studebaker bus, which was much cheaper and efficient to operate. In April 1916, Hillsborough annexed the Ansel Easton Ranch property. And by June, Adeline Easton, Ansel's mother, passes away. In November, newspapers reported that, now this is funny, having outgrown the Peninsula Farm, Ansel M. Easton recently began looking for a new location. He chose the upper end of the Sycamore Valley, lying against southeastern base of the famous mountain. That's Mount Diablo. The Hillsborough millionaire has purchased more than 1,200 acres of hill and valley land at the foot of Mount Diablo in Contra Costa County for a stock farm and distinctive California home in the architecture of old Spanish homes. The ranch will be called Black Hawk Stock Ranch, the name by which his holdings at Hillsborough were known for years. In September of 1916, a newspaper reported that the famous Black Hawk Shire horses of Burlingame Ranch had won all 30 first prizes at the California State Fair, a clean sweep. Perhaps not coincidentally, by January 1917, with their namesake moving across the bay, a progressive faction of Easton initiated a campaign to drop the appellation Easton Addition in favor of the popular name North Burlingame, that just 5 years before had been vehemently rejected. This time around, the preference was to be associated with, I quote, the thriving municipality of Burlingame, about which so much has been written and said in its favor. In September 1917, Ansel filed an application to abandon his Burlingame single-track railway. Only one car ever existed. The reason given was that the line, propelled by storage batteries, never paid the expense of operations, that it had been a constant source of loss. He promised to remove the track, pave the street, if permitted to abandon the system, which was granted, and that was granted on November 19, 1917. Concurrently, Easton applied to operate a 40-horsepower, 15-passenger Studebaker bus from the Broadway station to Alvarado Avenue, taking the place of the trolley, so that Easton settlers had a viable transportation. Easton proposed to charge 5 cents for each passenger each way and to make about 15 trips a day. The electric trolley ceased operations in 1918. This image shows 2 buses in operation rather than just one. Easton did build a beautiful California Spanish-style estate as planned, and he used it as a ranch for stock breeding business with his son-in-law, Amos Ward. It had a famous architect, Louis Mulgard, and it is beautiful. The stock market crash of 1929 was devastating to the Eastons, and by 1934, the family was forced to sell the Contra Costa County Black Hawk Ranch. They moved back to San Mateo County. They kept an apartment in San Francisco, and Easton died in his mid-70s at his home in August 1941 at 25 Baywood Avenue in San Mateo of pneumonia. And this area was kind of across from the old mills, the pool, that pool. His wife, Sarah, moved to Marin with her son's family, and she died in 1952. But you can see they were still doing horse stuff, or breeding for a long time, and cattle. And in closing, I thought I'd read you a poem composed by Ansel's wife, Sarah Louise Adams. The less you have, the more you have, of joy, carefree from sorrow. For when you've nothing in the bank, then no one comes to borrow. I just thought that was so cute. So anyway, that is what I have for you, and I don't know how quickly I. That wasn't bad. I have 10 minutes left to answer any questions. Yes.
So you go down Alvarado, down the stairs to Easton. What was that arch built for?
I have no idea. I think it was the difference. It was showing, I don't know, maybe Joanne has an idea. I think personally it was showing you, it's sort of like they stopped a development of a certain part, and maybe the next part was the Burlingame Hills. I have no idea. It clearly was a delineation. Oh no, I was always wondering, what is that? There was some part missing, and it doesn't help that it's half caved in now, or more than that. So it was really beautiful at one point. Anyone else?
They have something like that entered from El Camino to Ray Park,
Oh.
with that roundness.
Yeah.
And there used to be 2 ships on top of it.
I remember those.
And one was there for a long time. What happened?
Those are vandals. That's a project. I was always thinking if someone had an artisan who could make those. My father's business partner lived in Ray Park, and I just loved every time we'd visit him. I'd see the boats, and they were both up, and they were so cool. Yeah, and then even probably up to 20 years ago, there was a part of one boat left, and
Not
so
that long ago it was
yeah,
out there.
I know, it's so sad.
I thought somebody took it down to repair it, but
So did we all, but I don't think so.
That should be a project.
It should be a project.
Back up.
I know, and I actually have pictures of them, not really detailed ones, but I do have at least one good picture of one. So anyone knows an artisan who maybe wants to donate artistic time, I mean,
because it's all named after the explorers, so the
That's
boats
right.
make great sense.
Absolutely, and they were really neat.
Yeah.
And it's got kind of a Art Deco-y script there, which is still up. Thank goodness that's still up. Okay, so You, in the front, sorry.
Did you say that
Hi.
the tracks were removed in 1918?
I don't know when they were moved.
Because if you look at Carmelita and
Yeah.
Broadway, it looks like you can see
They're still there?
the image under the
If
asphalt.
they were just paved over.
So you know what I'm thinking? The problem with reading these clippings is it sounds like something's going to be done tomorrow, and just like you read the newspaper today, it sounds like, oh, it's imminent. Sometimes it happens way later, and sometimes not at all. So it sounds like he was running out of money, and maybe they just paved over, yeah. Way in the back, yes.
This is more of a comment than a question.
Sure.
So Ansel had a son named Lawrence Easton, and my dad was boyhood friends with him. And
Oh.
he used to tell me about he would take that trolley up so they could hang out.
Oh,
Yeah.
how neat. Yeah, Lawrence, that's right. They had to have 4 kids. Did one of them die? I don't
I
know.
thought they had a daughter,
Do-
Louise.
Louise, yeah, Louise. Louise is the one who married Ward, who ended up working with the father, his father-in-law. Yeah, so with the breeding. Way in the back.
Hey, Jen.
Hi,
Hi, good to see you.
you too. I can hardly see you because it's so bright.
Hey, listen, about those tracks, okay? I remember back in the 80s, maybe the early 80s, you could see the outline going up Carmelita, and when it turned onto Cabrillo, there was a big section in there that the ties would sunk. You could clearly see the markings of the tracks up the hillside. Around that time, I'm not sure what year, but the whole area got repaved and they disappeared. But for the longest
Aw.
time, and I think in that first history book that
Yeah.
came out in 1977, I
They-
think there's a story on that. I think it said on a moonlit night you could still see.
It does say that.
Yeah.
It does say that, and I don't live in the Easton Addition, so I didn't want to say something that wasn't true, because it might have been true in 1977 when it was written. We didn't repeat it I don't think in our book, which was, more recently, but I was afraid to put it in because I thought, what if it's not there? But it, wouldn't surprise me
That was until they repaved it.
till they repaved it. Yeah. Yeah, poor Syed.
These gardens and pillars, do they come from a English background?
That Daniels guy, I think he did them all. I have no proof. He did the road for sure. He did those upper benches. I think he did a lot of the other things too, the embellishments, because they were all hung out in the Bohemian Club. They were all buddies, and he had struck up a deal. Hey, want to do some benches for me and a whole project? And so I have no idea. Though I didn't want to say he did them that lower area because I had no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I don't know the origin. I think Kathy, don't you have a book called Garden Communities? Or something like that, Garden Cities, and we're one of them.
From the historical landscapes.
Yeah, I think we're garden. I mean, it was all kind of that, and that's probably from English background too. So,
I had read someplace that Ansel Easton died because he was thrown off of his horse, Blackhawk, and he died because of that. Is that true?
I don't think so, but I actually don't know. Didn't I find a certificate? First we thought he died in that earthquake, because which is a little while later. Then we decided, no, there was actually a reason given why he died, but I can't remember. It wasn't heart attack, it was his son. No, it might have been heart attack. But I just don't know. That's another thing, you don't know for sure. Yeah.
I can't remember where I read it.
Yeah. That might, also don't forget, it might have been the other one, the architect, remember Page Brown? Yeah, the A. Page Brown that got thrown, and he died way later, but not early enough to get the life insurance. His wife had no life insurance on him. It was really sad. Yeah. Or the architect.
This is just a comment regarding the staircase that goes from Alvarado down to Easton. And that is such a wonderful artifact from the period. And it's falling into disrepair, and it's really a shame to see that happen. One of the brick pillars at the end is just being pushed over by a tree. It could be mitigated very easily.
Absolutely.
City council person is here.
City council person who, actually, she might have had to leave early. Yeah, she ran out, but she told me she had to leave early, but that's the kind of thing where it would really help we write things all the time. I wrote one about the cupola the other day, so it needs also a paint job, the one in the parking lot. So it would be good to write a letter, because sometimes they just don't know, and we do have hopefully a project planned just to call attention to the importance of that shelter up there, which they could clean up a bit. But we just did a panel installation, 2 of them, just this week, one in Washington Park, to kind of tell people what Washington Park was and before, in the Burlingame High School area, before they changed into what they are now, and so how they evolved. And so it's sort of informative, and I would really like to do something about Easton up at that trolley area, because people don't even know there was a trolley there. It's really interesting, and so maybe it would be something nice. You kind of bring attention to one area. It's like, hey, what about those stairs? That helps. Yeah.
Okay, both Easton and Hillside are 80 feet wide,
Oh, wow. Both Easton and Hillside.
both of them.
Wow. But you know what? Easton did that. The lower end where the trees are, because they might have included the planter boxes, the planter, which are enormous. Yeah, they did that to save the trees. That's why that one is, for sure. Because the road was after the tree.
The lower Easton isn't that wide from...
If you count though the tree sections, it might be. I'm not sure. The medians, yeah, because they're really wide. Not sure. Does anyone else have anything? No? Well, I hope you had a good time. Wow, it's exactly 8. I did, if you meet people in there like, oh darn, I missed it or couldn't see it, I think I mentioned before, we're trying to figure out a way, Ray, thank you Ray for volunteering tonight and filming, he's great. Yeah, and he's going to work together with Jason and try to get it on a YouTube or something through the library or on our own website, so we will figure it out. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming. Oh, the next meeting, it was on, the next meeting, we're Joanne and I are kind of working that out. It's a walking tour. So, right, is that right? Did I do that right? Sunday, August 4th at 1 p.m. It probably will leave from the station. We don't know details, so watch out for your newsletter. But it'll be fun. Thank you.
Victorian Days.
It's Victorian, thank you. San Mateo County Historical Association, Victoria Days umbrella.